So the fact that Becky Lynch got here, Becky Lynch should be the one who gets that spotlight. She earned it, and Charlotte's going to continue. We know this. Going to continue.
Becky will get a spotlight, all right, when she beats the shit out of both of them and walks out of WrestleMania the Raw Women's Champion. And I could see her unifying the two titles, the Raw and the SmackDown Women's titles, because it is rumored, it is alleged, that the WWE plans on doing that this year. And I agree that they should do that. If you're going to have only one set of tag team titles for the women, you might as well only have one world title for the women. Just bring both rosters together. When they first brought back the brand split, I didn't want them to split the women in two. I don't know whose call that was to do that. I never agreed with that because the women's division is thin. And it seems like even though they add women and they call them up from NXT, it's still thin. Which is strange, but it still feels thin. And the thing is that now that I think about it, they don't call enough women up from NXT. I think that's the issue. And since they don't do that, what's the sense of splitting the division in two instead of just having one? Like, you track and trace all of the NXT call-ups that have happened since the brand split was brought back. Like 90% of the call-ups were men, right? Like 90% of the call-ups were men. Finn Balor, who else? Elias, Sanity. Who else got called up? Who else? I'm not talking about any recent call-ups. I'm talking about like tracing back to 2016 and 17. Baron Corbin, even though he was called up before the brand split. But they pretty much called him up in preparation for the brand split. Shinsuke Nakamura, Joe, many more. I don't have all night to list them, but there have been most of the NXT call-ups over the last 2+ years have been for the men instead of the women. They have not called up enough women. That's why the division looks the way it looks, which is not stacked like it should be. Like, the women's division should be stacked. They have a shitload of women in the company. They have more women in the company than they've ever had. Ever. So they should be stacked, but they're not. So that's why it is a good idea to put them all back together and have them all work each other and compete against each other. You know, I think that the women should have been, it should have been like this. When they had the brand split, when they brought back the brand split in 2016, it should have been the women on Raw, and then you take the guys from the Cruiserweight Classic and you put them on SmackDown. And you make SmackDown, I don't want to say make SmackDown exactly like Nitro, but give it that same formula of you start the show off hot and heavy with Cruiserweight action, and then all of the main event and mid-card guys come in later during the show. You know, it was rumored for a while that SmackDown was going to turn it into 3 hours, which I don't even watch SmackDown anymore, and I hope they don't do that still. Even though I don't watch anymore, I still hope they don't do that. But if they were to do that, they should get rid of 205 Live and let the Cruiserweights just be exclusive to SmackDown. Kind of like it was in the Ruthless Aggression era. In the Ruthless Aggression era, the Cruiserweights were exclusive to SmackDown. There weren't any Cruiserweights on Raw. And if there were any small guys on Raw, they were not used. And if they were used, they were used to job out the main event stars. So
you to get opportunity after opportunity following this WrestleMania and beyond. And let's be honest, Charlotte's still going to get a big match at WrestleMania. We're not going to have a WrestleMania unless Charlotte's injured where she doesn't have a big match.
Don't you think that
There's a difference between having a big match and a main event, Sam. Hulk Hogan and Rock was a big match at WrestleMania 18. Was that the main event? No. It should have been the main event, but was it a main event? No. People know WrestleMania 18's main event for being Jericho and Triple H, which that's what it was, for the undisputed title. You know, should Shawn and Taker have been the main event at 25? Luckily, they rectified their mistake and did the right thing for 26. But should Shawn and Taker have been the main event at 25? Yes. Was it? No. There's a difference between having a big match and a main event match. I believe Sam is one of those guys where he believes that in the double main event, in the so-called triple main event. No. That doesn't exist. As much as the WWE and the UFC likes to push that shit on you, the whole co-main event and double main event and triple main event, there's no such thing as that. The main event is last. It's the last match on the card. And as the last match on the card, it's supposed to represent the biggest match in the entire show. It's supposed to represent the show stealer of the entire show. Now, there are main events that end up being underwhelming and sometimes are just complete trash. But the main event is supposed to signify the last match on the card, the biggest match on the card, and worthy of being the main event. There's a difference between a big match and a main event. You can have big matches all night long. If you're not the main event, not many people are going to care. Most will, but some won't.
Charlotte and Asuka 2
That's my pick.
would be just like
Awesome.
Nope. I mean, it would. Okay. Let me backtrack. It would be quote unquote awesome, but they've been running the house show circuit for the last several months. I mean, the last several months. They've been working almost every house show with each other, which I don't know what is the point of that if they're not going to have the match at WrestleMania again. They worked several house shows. And I mean, it would be interesting, and I wouldn't have mind seeing Charlotte and Asuka too. It's just that, what if Charlotte wins again? If Charlotte wins, that's the thing. There's so many people, right? There's so many fans that want, at the end of WrestleMania, they want all of the 4 horsewomen to celebrate, right? With their respective titles and success. They want that. And they felt that that would have been appropriate had Charlotte been given the match with Asuka instead of giving the match with Ronda. But let's think about this for a second. Charlotte beats Asuka 2 years in a row. We all know what the fans are going to say now. Let's be serious here. We all know what the fans are going to say. Asuka's dead. Asuka's buried. How could they have her lose to Charlotte 2 years in a row? This is ridiculous. The mystique is gone. I can't take Asuka seriously. They're all going to say that. And if Asuka wins, why couldn't we have the 4 horsewomen celebration with all of them winning the titles? It's not right. Charlotte is the only one celebrating with them without a title. It doesn't feel complete. It doesn't feel right. You're going to have the fans complain either way. So that's literally a lose-lose situation to have Charlotte wrestle Asuka in a rematch again. It's a lose-lose. Nobody wins in that situation. And the fans will certainly not feel like they've won. So it's a lose-lose situation.
Eller on WrestleMania pay-per-view?
Because think about it. Last year at WrestleMania, what did Charlotte do? She had that giant match against Asuka where it was title versus undefeated streak, eyes. What did Becky do? She lost in a battle royal in the pre-show, right?
Yeah.
You don't look at losing in a battle royal in the pre-show and go, well, clearly she'll be in the main event next year. But she got here, right? She wasn't here. She got here. Charlotte's been here. She's going to continue to be here. She is Charlotte.
Well, how do you know that, Sam? What if she gets hurt? What if all of a sudden the toll that wrestling takes on the human anatomy, on the human body, what if she starts breaking down? How do we know that Charlotte is going to be here for years upon years? Are we forgetting that Charlotte is almost 33? Like, are we really forgetting that? She's almost 33. She's not no spring chicken. And she started wrestling late, in her late 20s. Do we really believe that what we're getting out of Charlotte right now, we're going to be getting out of her for the next 5 years? Because we're not. I don't believe that'll happen. Now, some wrestlers are able to overcome the wear and tear, and some wrestlers are able to overcome the aging process of their body, and are still able to wrestle at an elite level for the rest of their career, i.e. Shawn Michaels, i.e. AJ Styles, to a certain extent Bret Hart, Eddie Guerrero, guys like that. But it's rare. It's still very rare to be able to do that and really feel as special as those guys still felt heading into their late 30s, and for some cases early 40s for those guys. Not everybody's able to do that. So we don't know, unless Charlotte changes up her style and tones down some of the things that she does in the ring to be able to protect herself enough to be able to continue to wrestle at an elite level for the next 5 to 7 years. Now, if she does that, then sure, we can say she's gonna be here, she's gonna be here, she's gonna keep being here. But we don't know that. How can we be so sure? She's almost 33. She's coming towards the end of her prime. Physically. And if she keeps going as hard as she went last year and being involved in the gimmick matches, I don't see her still being here for the next 5 to 7 years. The human anatomy, like a wise man once said, can only take so much punishment and pain. And she's not a spring chicken. She's 33. She's the oldest out of all of the horsewomen. Let's not forget that.
She is consistent. This is Becky Lynch's moment. Who knows what's going to happen a year from now, but we're here where we are now. Let's put the spotlight on Becky Lynch.
Now, listen, I agree with you.
Spotlight is on her and has been on her. So let's not front like they're doing absolutely nothing with Becky. And I know this was recorded earlier this month, this interview, this conversation, but Becky's doing a lot, and she's gonna win. I don't really see the problem.
You guys, I think the better match would be a one-on-one match with Becky and Ronda Rousey.
I don't think so.
But at the same time, you only get that first one time. You're only going to have
Agreed.
that first main event at WrestleMania just that time at WrestleMania 35. And I think there is a story with Charlotte. I mean, you're just saying she's going to get opportunity after opportunity. Well, that's the story that Becky's been saying. That because of her name, she gets these opportunities. You could kill
But it's
two
not
birds,
a name.
But you could kill two birds with one stone.
But it's not just the name. It's not just the name. She's actually earned... I'm sick of people with the name garbage. It's garbage now. It's garbage, bullshit, false narrative. Okay? If we want to go by name, then how come David Sammartino was never world champion? How come Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. was never world champion? If we want to talk about name recognition, how come Horace Hogan never got to the top of the card? How come David Flair Because we forget about David Flair. How come David Flair wasn't as successful? I mean, come on. How come Carmella has never been seen? She's second generation. Are we forgetting that one? That Carmella's second generation. So, how come Carmella is not seen the same way that Charlotte is seen? How come she's not being quote-unquote over-pushed? She has a name too. Her father worked with the WWE back in the 80s. Albeit as a jobber, but still. That still counts for something. That still counts for something. So this whole name thing is ridiculous. Because by that logic, David Sammartino would have been... He would have taken Hulk Hogan's spot. There wouldn't be no Hulk Hogan if that were the case. We would have had David Sammartino as the guy in the 80s instead of Hogan. So come on now. Charlotte is way more athletic than her father was. I don't want to say she's overall better. I don't want to say that, at least not now. Let's wait till the end of her career to be able to evaluate her father and her career side by side. I think it would be much more fair to do that. But Charlotte has actually worked for what she's been given. Has she still been given a little bit too much? Yes, I will agree with that. What is it, 7 world championships? That's ridiculous. 7 world championships in less than 4 years. That's a problem to me. But she's made the most out of those 7 world championships. And she's created memories and classic after classic after classic upon those 7 world championships. Let's not act like Charlotte is the great Khali or something. Let's not act like she can't wrestle.
Stone, you could have that entitled person like a Charlotte Flair who gets the opportunities based on that in the main event, and then you have Ronda Rousey, who's the chosen corporate champion, that's the mainstream name, and Becky could be both.
It's too much.
They both won. Like Charlotte, Ronda is the champion and has won that championship. Nobody handed her that championship. She didn't win.
Thank you, Mark.
That in a 4-way or a 3-way or in a battle royal. She won it. Becky won her opportunity in a roundabout way.
I mean, first of all, the day started with her tapping out to Asuka, and then she put herself into the Royal Rumble, but I digress.
Fit Finlay put her in the Royal Rumble. Fit Finlay's got authority around there.
He didn't even say anything. He's just like,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Look, here's the problem. It's
Get out there.
Get out there. Do your thing. It's too much, and it does take away.
How is it too much? Nobody was saying that this was too much when it came down to Bryan, Orton, and Batista. When Bryan had to beat Triple H earlier in the night to get into the triple threat. It wasn't too much back then. So why is it too much now? I don't know. I think that people who are saying this are coming from a little bit of an emotional level. And I think that people who believe this, and no disrespect to Sam, I respect his opinion, I get where he's coming from because a lot of people have said this. I think if you believe what he's saying, and you believe what he believes, and you feel that exact same way, you probably think Becky won't win. Because I feel like no one in their right mind who really believes that Becky will win the title would say this. Because if you thought she was going to win, you wouldn't say this. That tells me that he and whoever else believes what he's saying has doubt that they will put Becky over. I didn't have any doubt that they would put Bryan over throughout that whole storyline. And I was just as upset as everybody else when he had gotten eliminated from the Rumble after putting on a classic match against Bray Wyatt in the opener. I remember that time. I was just as upset as everybody else that he had gotten eliminated in the Rumble. I was just as upset that he didn't win it. least Becky won the Rumble. Like, can we acknowledge that for a second? Like, at least Becky won the Rumble. Bryan didn't. And it still seems like there have been more backlash around this situation than there was with Daniel Bryan. It's weird.
Way from Becky to allow Charlotte another opportunity when we know, I understand, like, there's only going to be one first female main event.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's going to be the best female main event. If you come at Hell in a Cell next year and you can put on a women's match that's better than Charlotte versus Sasha Banks was, not to take anything away from that match, but if you do a women's Hell in a Cell match that's better than Charlotte versus Sasha Banks, that's the one that's going to be talked about.
People are going to talk about better.
Yeah, but people are still going to talk about the first. Is Buddy Rogers the greatest WWE champion of all time? No. Do people remember him being the first WWE champion? Yes. Buddy Rogers was only champion for what? 2 weeks? Before he dropped it to Bruno? But we all remember that he was the first WWE champion. People remember first evers. Everybody remembers first evers. You remember where the first WrestleMania was. You remember who the first WWE champion was. You remember who the first Intercontinental champion was. You remember where the first Royal Rumble was. You remember the first Hell in a... For God's sakes, you remember the first Hell in a Cell match. People remember first eras, so I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Always wins. The reason we talk about the first Hell in a Cell match between Shawn Michaels and Hell in a Cell is, but the reason we talk about that first one was because it's arguably the best Hell in a Cell match. The Undertaker-Shawn Michaels match.
It's debatable now. Was it the best at that time? Was it the best for like the first 3-4 years of Hell in a Cell? Yes. Is it still the greatest Hell in a Cell match of all time? That's debatable. That's debatable. That's debatable now. You could argue. I still very much like Triple H and Shawn's Hell in a Cell match from Bad Blood 04. I kind of like Jericho and Triple H from Judgment Day 02. That wasn't a bad cell match. It's kind of too little too late for that match, but the end of an era. Say what you will, both men were past their prime, but Taker and Triple H, that was classic. Classic. Mostly remembered for its storytelling as opposed to match quality. Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins from 2016, which is the most recent one that I've named so far. That was hard hitting. That was probably the best. I don't want to say technical because that's a weird word, it's a weird way of phrasing it, but that was a really good Hell in a Cell match. It was a really good Hell in a Cell match. I think people have forgotten about it because people have kind of forgotten about Kevin Owens' Universal title reign, but he did have a really good Universal title reign. It's just that the way in which he lost it and the way he was positioned on the card afterwards, that's what sucked. But the title reign itself was really good. And he was having really great to damn near classic, borderline classic matches with almost everybody. Rollins, Reigns, even the Fatal 4-Way where he won the title was really good.
Is a classic
Yes.
match, and that's why that one gets talked about. First is a little thing for the history book, but best is what gets talked about. Legacy is built
Best and first gets talked about equally.
on best, not built on first. Charlotte doesn't have an issue with this. She doesn't need this. This isn't even a chapter. When you're going through the chapters of Charlotte...
No, she very much needs it. She very much needs it. Because that'll give her the credibility and also the statistic of saying that I did so much first that my father wasn't able to do.
In the future, another WrestleMania. This is going to be the year that this thing happened because somebody came up out of nowhere and set the world on fire, and that's Becky Lynch. And if anybody's going to get that first victory over Ronda Rousey, that's where it's going to count. In all honesty,
Yep.
Charlotte getting a victory over Ronda Rousey, it does exactly what I just said for Charlotte. Just another checkbox, another checkbox, another checkbox.
But Sam, she's 33, Sam. She's 33. We cannot forget that. Age is very much a factor in wrestling. Age is very much a factor in all sports.
Becky going to WrestleMania and getting a victory over Ronda Rousey makes Becky's career.
And I think, and we talked about it earlier, Mark, Ronda's obviously a mainstream name already. Charlotte Flair's a mainstream name already. Becky Lynch is not. It's going to take that victory at WrestleMania 35 to put her on that tier.
No, I'd say she already is mainstream. I would say she already is a mainstream name because of how insanely over she has been the last several months. Becky has done arguably the most media appearances out of anyone on the roster in the last several months alone.
Along with Charlotte and Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about Becky Lynch in a mainstream way, but it's one of these like, oh, who's that other wrestler that everybody's talking about now? Like, I know the Flair and I know Ronda. Isn't there another one that everybody's talking about? And that's the
They
man.
will know her name
Absolutely.
after WrestleMania.
Well,
Absolutely.
after what we saw at NXT TakeOver in Phoenix, everybody knows the name of Sam Roberts. Sam, thanks so much for the time, my friend.
Thank you for having me, and I'm.
All right, well, that's it on Sam Roberts' take on the controversy from TakeOver Phoenix with Bianca Belair and his thoughts on the WrestleMania women's main event. I respect his opinion. This isn't me shitting on him. Both of these videos have not been me trying to shit on him in any type of way, shape, or form. I respect him and I respect his opinions, and he's entitled to them. But you know, I don't agree, and I feel like personally he lacks making valid points for his arguments. I'm out.